Here we are, episode 27 with Jacob Parsons from the band From This Day Forward. I always struggle saying like from. It just seems like a double like negative. So how are you today?
I mean, I spent the day working, but I've been really excited to do this, and I've wanted to be on the podcast for a while, so I'm excited about it. What about you?
We are definitely two of the most fortunate people at this moment. We both have jobs, which I'm very thankful for, and I'm fortunate for the fact that I have a podcast and I get to talk to people like you, musicians around the local scene. So let's get into it, Mr. Jacob.
Yeah.
First question here. Whose idea was the band From This Day Forward?
Well, I technically should say it was Eddie and Spencer, since technically I wasn't there for the start of it. I joined like maybe 3 weeks after this idea happened. I was actually part of another like unknown speck on the map local band that was having issues, and I met Bobby. And Bobby kind of pulled me in, and that's how I ended up there.
So it was a connection through Bobby. Bobby obviously knowing Eddie and Spencer. Had you known Speddy and Enser? Had you known Spencer and Eddie before Bobby?
So it's kind of funny, because Eddie's a really close friend of mine. But prior to that, the group of people that I had worked with we were all like high schoolers, and so we all knew about his old band, The Point Past Insanity. So to me, I hadn't been in the local scene. I joined at like 17. So he was like a local celebrity to me. So when Bobby like brought the idea and he's like, hey, this is the people we have, I was like, oh my gosh. So I technically didn't know him. I think I had met Spencer like one time prior, but nothing like personal or anything.
Gotcha. Yeah, I remember when Spencer, I even talked about this on our podcast, when Spencer didn't even know how to play guitar. And then I think him being roommates with Eddie, those two like jamming every single day, and Eddie kind of teaching what he knows to Spencer. I would say that was probably the origin of the band. They finally said, fuck it, let's get a band together. And then as things happened,
yeah,
obviously you got introduced. How did Mike Donnelly get in there? I've actually known Mike. I've probably known him since I was 9 or 10. I've known him for a long time.
Jesus. Mike technically was the last real member that we had. Technically we did have a drummer when we started, when we were writing stuff, but they weren't there. We had a drummer, quote unquote, but they didn't practice with us. They weren't really active with us, and we ended up just phasing them out. And when we went to look for a drummer after, God, I think Restoration was written by the time we got Mike, which was probably like 6 months in, and we probably had like I think by the first 6 months, we had every single song off the first album but Judgment written, and that was the last one that we wrote. And we ended up just like sending a feeler out on Facebook and being like, hey, we need a drummer. And we did one audition before we did Mike, and we auditioned Brian Bratt, the guitarist for Blessed Are the Merciless, and
okay.
he was awesome. We actually, for a while, we thought he was going to be our permanent drummer, and he ended up just, life came and he had to step back, and we ended up pulling Mike in, and we loved his personality, and he was amazing to have around, and now we're here.
Boom. And you guys, the last show you guys played, was that at the waiting room?
I think so. We really didn't play that Vario show. We got pulled on last minute, and everything happened with it. So I think technically, the last one we played was the waiting room.
Man, that was a Tale Untold CD release, right?
Yeah, it was an amazing show. I'm very glad we got to do it.
And it seems like so far away, yet that was what, January? So I guess it's been 3 months or so.
No, it feels like because of everything that's been going on in the world, that everything's happening so slow and so fast at the same time.
Right. And if we backtrack to that Vario show, for the people who didn't know that all the bands showed up, it got pulled last minute. Like bands, dealers from Australia, they were on their last, that was going to be their last show of the tour here in Omaha, and then they got pulled last second. Varios, I don't know where they're from. But and then you guys got thrown on last minute as well. So who reached out to you? Was it Josh who was like, hey, we could use another band here?
So Josh messaged us at like 3:00. I had just gotten off work, and he's like, hey, like I need somebody on this. Can you guys be here in like 3 hours? And we ended up we felt so bad because Mike like was super busy that day, and we begged him to drop everything he was doing. So Mike like dropped everything he was doing. He was like moving and everything, and he rushed out, and it was such a disaster. And yeah,
And the sad thing is that's going to be like our last show experience. That's going to be like the last taste in our mouth up until whenever this thing goes away. So like August, let's just say best case scenario, August. We're going to have, we were at the Vario show, it got canceled, and now we got to sit with that for the next 5 months. But the good thing is when the scene gets back together, I'm telling you, when it's going to hit, it's going to fucking hit. I don't think local shows are going to be like your, oh yeah, 20, 25 people are going to show up anymore. I think it's going to be hundreds, like 150, 200 people showing up locals all the time, because I think up until this point, people in Omaha have been taking the local shows for granted. They're like, oh yeah, it doesn't have this band on it, or it doesn't have this band on it. I think after this is all said and done, we need to be more appreciative of the artists that we have in this area and attend way more than we have been. You agree or disagree?
I totally agree. And I think that not only is it going to reflect that way for the local scene, but I think it, I think we're learning a lot about the scene in the community in general worldwide. And we're learning how this is affecting professional musicians who they base their whole lives off this, and they're totally blindsided by something that's completely out of their hands, and we have to try to ride it out as much as we can. That's why I can't agree more with what you said at the beginning. Like, as much as I wish I could sit at home and quarantine, I am thankful that I have my own sense of income, and I don't have to worry about not being able to pay my car payment.
Right. Yeah. Last week I spoke to Drama, which was the guest. He's a rapper out of Lincoln. He is very fortunate in the sense that he's able to produce music out of his house, being that he's a rapper. He can make up all the beats and such. What have you and what have the band been doing, I guess, during this break? Are you guys still practicing? I guess, how do you guys practice in the meantime?
Well, and I'm very much an advocate of this, but Eddie was really the one who taught me how important it was. But we very much stress on practicing on our own time. That's why we've always tried to provide everybody with the materials to have quality practice tracks and everything. So it is unfortunate because we're not really in a position anymore where any of us have our own practice space. We kind of phased that out a while ago. So for a long time, we would rent a room out at Guitar Center because they had lights. They have a PA, and we can run our backtracks and stuff. And obviously that's closed down now. So it's been very obviously upsetting that we're not able to make that happen as easily anymore. We have been working a lot behind the scenes on a lot of different stuff, though. We have a lot of God, I really don't know how much I can say about other stuff.
You don't want to give it away?
Well, we've kind of had an agreement like very early on with this one that we didn't, because one of the big mistakes that we made with restoration is that we were so open about it and we took our sweet time with it. So by the time it came and restoration was a finished product, we had already, everybody knew, it was,
Right.
there was no surprise. So we're trying to be a little bit more hush about it. I think we played a track off of I'll say it's an EP. We have a 6-song EP, and we played a track off of it at Fright Night last year.
Okay. Now, I've been seeing multiple artists, they're contemplating on whether to even like drop an album or drop an EP right now during this time. And I've seen resistance from one side and acceptance from the other. The resistance comes by people being like, well, I'm at home. If I'm at home, I'm probably not going to be listening to music. Whereas somebody like you and I, who are delivery drivers, we have all the time in the world to be listening to music. So I've kind of seen a 50-50 split from an artist's perspective. Would you be someone who would be opposed to dropping new music during the quarantine, or would you be all for it?
I have a very modern way of how I think about that and how I market that. And I think it all depends on how you want to represent your content and what you want to be your main distribution tactic. So I think it's a great thing. I think that I think that people are going to want to listen to music while they're at home during this. And I think even more than that, there's more people on their phone. And if you can market your product correctly, not everybody's going to be sitting down and be like, okay, I'm going to listen to this whole album.
Sure.
There's a very select set of people, but if you can properly market a single and somebody just checks out your new track, that's everybody being at home on their phones is a great way to generate that traffic. But if you're the kind of person that thinks, hey, the way I want to get my album into the hands of people is I want to go out and I want to tour and I want to meet these people and I want to be putting this in the hands of people, then obviously this isn't your time.
Right.
I have a more, like I said, I have a more modern and digital-based perspective of it. So, I mean, depending on how long it lasts, I want from this day forward to release content in it.
Right, especially if you got it banked up. Now, to kind of transition here, you see bands like Atreyu. Like Atreyu just dropped a track with, I think it was M Shadows and Aaron Gillespie. There's bands, I don't think it's because of the quarantine, but I think like bands from way back when are starting to come back. So like 2019, bands are coming back. 2020, bands are coming back. Do you think it's a money grab, or do you think these people just actually miss the touring life? You think people just want to get back into the scene?
I think it's hard to say for every case, but I think that a lot of these people have built their lives around this, and eventually you get to a point where, especially these people that have been doing it since like even the early 90s, they get families, and it's not always like when you're doing this 100% and you're a world-renowned band and you're on tour 8 months a year, you don't get the amenity to spend quality time with your family. So I think a lot of those people, even for years, just have to take the time to step away. I mean, Atreyu was gone for a while, and they've been back for a while too. Same with Sum 41's another great one. I think there's a point where it's your life, but sometimes it has to go on hold because you have to let something else happen.
Right. Now, speaking of throwback bands, which band sticks out to you in your mind, let's say 40 years from now, 2060? What bands are you still going to be rocking? You're going to show your kids, you're going to show your grandkids, you're going to be like, when I was growing up, I was listening to these bands. Go.
I mean, if I really want my kids to take after me, I really want them to take like the darker side of what I like. So, Motionless in White, I love the horror-based stuff. Same with Ice Nine Kills. I've been listening to them since their original EP. Even over to stuff like Volumes. I love the groovier, sort of poppier bass sort of stuff. Really, I couldn't even list off all the things that I would want to pass on to my offspring if I ever had any.
Now, the song, I think it's On My Mind or On Her Mind by Volumes. The
Yeah.
bass line in that is so chunky. Like, you understand what the definition of chunky means. Clearly, if you're a bassist or if you just know music. So I listen to it in my car and it like rattles. Boom ba doom ba doom, doom ba doom ba doom, doom ba doom ba doom. I'm like, oh, that bass line is sick. And I don't think it's anything crazy, but then again, I don't play bass.
No, it's not anything crazy, but I think a lot of people mistake that with it not being an impressive thing. I think that's almost like the hook of the intro verse. Like that's such an important part of what pulls you onto that song. And I've been fortunate from the times I've seen Volumes probably 4 times now. So and I've talked to their bassist. His name's Raed Sudani. He's phenomenal. I think that's exactly with what I was saying is they're a very like modern and hip hop oriented sort of influence band. And I think that's why a song like On Her Mind, which, has Puya on it and everything, is a great track for them because it has that very hip-hop based influence to it.
Right. Now, would you say that bassist kind of influences you? So, for example, anytime I'm trying to draw inspiration on drums, I'm lucky enough to type in something like Drumeo, and I could look up Tony Royce, or I could look up Jared Falk. I could look up all kinds of different musicians and maybe pull something from each one. Is there like a channel or a way you can see different bassists on YouTube?
I mean, not that I've really looked into. I've kind of always been, I get in grooves. So there's times where I grew up very like, my dad played bass in punk bands when I was growing up. So I grew up around that. And I grew up listening to a lot of punk. So now that reflects a lot of how I play.
Gotcha.
And so when I write, a lot of what I write kind of reflects around these core bands and sounds that I've grown up with. But there is sometimes where I just like, I hear something or I hear somebody play something and I'm like, okay, well, that makes me think of this. And then I have to take that to my recording setup and I have to record that. And then I just spring out a song that's totally different than anything I've ever done, but it's still me.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say you draw ideas from other types of, or I guess other musicians, other types of music, because when I'm playing drums, I absolutely love and I absolutely respect any funk drummer and any church drummer, any gospel drummer, anything like that. Like, don't get me wrong, I love listening to hardcore music and double kicks and stuff. That's all fun. But I want to see somebody who plays that type of music really like dig into funk or really dig into gospel music and try to play drums that.
Yeah, dude, I totally agree. I'm an okay drummer. I went through a period where I learned how to play drums, and I really loved learning to hip-hop music and rap music. So I would drum along to Post Malone songs, and I would write my fills to that, and I was able to work with the beat and kind of then take the fills and stuff that I had written for that, and I'm able to repurpose them for the hardcore music I make. And because of how the hip hop song is, it sets up a fill in a way that I never would have written it for a hardcore song in the first place.
Now, you just touch on another thing, fills. So this is gonna be a weird transition. You ready for this? Do you watch Jared Dines?
I do occasionally. I've been watching his stuff here and there for years.
Okay, so I used to listen to him and watch him like 2 or 3 years ago. Most recently, he's posting videos where he's like, I wrote this little tidbit on guitar, and I let others interpret it, right? The one reason I absolutely hate that is because he's making money off of these people submitting videos of them playing guitar or playing drums. Like, there's no way those guys are making money. He's using people to make money. Granted, at the same time, maybe these guys get, I mean, they were on Jared Dines' channel for 10 seconds and maybe somebody hits them up. But I don't see it as useful to the person submitting the clip. I see it more useful to Jared Dines. Does that make sense?
No, I totally get what you mean. And I think when you get to a point where you're that big of a YouTuber and you're trying to figure out what works and not get to a point where you're beating a dead horse in a sense. Because he would do his 10 this is how a drummer acts in a metal band, like that sort of thing. And you can only do that so many times. And then you do so many different, because he tried doing he did vlogs for a while and that sort of thing. And he did he did gear stuff for a while. And I think after a while you find something that works, and then that probably works for him because it's interacting with a community. And I try to do the same thing with From This Day Forward, where you try to do something where you get people to interact with your product. So it's not just hey, this is something I did, look at this. It's, hey, this is something I did and I want you to do this to follow it up. And so he does that, and then that gets these people. So say he does that, and some guy's like, okay, I want to have my guitar track on Jared Dines' channel. He records it. He shows everybody that he knows that he recorded it. It's all over his Facebook and everything. And then that just pushes his channel further.
Gotcha. So I can see both sides of it, I guess, more clearly now. I didn't think of it from that perspective where, as you said, I don't know. I just those type of videos and reaction videos. How are people getting popular off of reaction videos? Even Jake Lurs from August Burns Red is doing reaction videos now. Granted, I think it's because of the quarantine. I don't think he'd be doing it unless it was for the quarantine. But it's
I totally get what you mean. It does feel in a sense like they're exploiting somebody else's skill, and I get that. But I think in a sense, he has a huge community, and like I said, I think you get to a point where you're just trying to do whatever works.
Right. Well, maybe he's trying to make money during the quarantine.
I wouldn't blame him. That's his sole income. I get it.
It's just sad to see, desperate times, desperate measures. These people are all making YouTubes out of desperation. Granted, I'm sure they'll get an instant following and make decent money at it, but I just wish they would.
I think, especially when it comes to, Jake Lures is a great example where it's something new for him. I think they're off tour and, they can't really gather with their bandmates or with their label or anything. And it gives them the ability to, like I said, just interact with their fan base from where they're at. And it keeps not only their fans, but those people from feeling the disconnect from their craft.
Also, that just sparked a question for me. You remember on Facebook how if you liked somebody's, a band page's status enough times, they would give you, a top fan badge?
Mm-hmm.
Are they still doing that?
I think so. I think I have a top badge for your podcast.
Stop it.
No, I'm serious. I think I have a top badge for your podcast, and I think I have a top badge for Keeper of the Morgue.
Yeah, Keeper.
But that's because I was with them. So, I mean, I was always up to date on their stuff.
Oh, man, keeper. I wish that band would have kept going. They released a dope ass EP. They're great to watch live, and then stuff just happened. But
Yeah.
if you know,
Yeah, and I totally do. I'm great friends with everybody in the band, and it's a phenomenal record. I'm so happy that for the small period of time that I was with them, I was able to work with them, and I've been good friends with Matt for a long time. I've known Matt he was one of the first people that I really got to know in the music scene, and he's been amazing to me as a friend, and I've done multiple different collaborations with him, and I do agree that I wish that things could have worked out with Keeper, because I feel like there was so much there, and performing with them all being good friends and being able to see them at the January show with us, it made me really happy. They did phenomenal, and I felt like there was really something there.
right, and their origin story is very fun to go back and find out how those two met each other. And then even Matt was like, the only reason I think I know Matt McClure is because he commented on my very first podcast that I did with Alex Sloan. He's like, hey, great content, keep it up. And then I messaged him and I was like, hey, thanks for saying that. I really appreciate it. And then we went out to lunch, and then now we're married. I don't know how that happened so quick, but we're like married, and we don't have any kids yet, but maybe.
I totally get it. He's a great guy to know. He's one of the best people in the scene to know, and I can't stress that enough. I guarantee that anybody who gets to have that personal interaction with him would agree with me.
Right.
The dude does more than anybody I've ever met in the music scene out here to go the extra mile for other people.
Yeah, and even seeing him on like Facebook Live, he's like practicing solos, right? But he didn't give you any context as to why he was practicing the solo, but he was submitting his solo to a contest. But you've seen him play the solo 30-something times. Like, I don't have enough patience to play the same lick on the drums 30 times. He's doing this for a minute and a half, doing tappy-tappies and doing a little strummy-strummies.
Oh, that's part of playing guitar, man. I've been playing a lot more guitar than I have bass, especially as we've been finishing up the album and everything. And there's times where it's trial and error. You'll play a riff and you're like, okay, I need to learn this riff. You play it the first time and you do it terribly.
Right.
And then you play it the next time and you're like, okay, I did this better. This is what I need to do. You do it again and again and again, and eventually something's going to stick.
Now, question for you. Do you have very calloused fingers, or are they nice and soft?
I have callous fingers because I've been doing the bass thing for like 10 plus years.
Gotcha. See?
But I don't play with my fingers, so.
Oh, you strum the bass with a little pick?
Yeah, it's a very controversial thing in the bass world. I like the sound of a pick more. It has more attack.
Gotcha. You don't slap the bass.
I was gonna say, dude, if you heard a mix of Restoration with me playing with my fingers, it would sound completely different.
Does it just sound really weak? Like your strumming sounds weak?
Yes.
Gotcha.
And the bass for Restoration has a very like signature, like very very impacting tone that we did with Anu, because I wanted to have it almost like what Wage War had going on, because they were a huge influence when I was working on stuff.
When Wage War first hit the scene, fucking man. But now, I don't know how to explain them now. I think when they first came out, I was like sold, and I think this happens with most bands. You get hyped about them right off the bat, and then they make another album. It's like, yeah, that one's not bad off their rookie album. And then the third album comes out, and you're like, yeah, I like a song or two, and then you almost lose touch. You almost like lose fanship for them. For example, like the Word Alive. When those guys first came out, I listened to the EP, I listened to Deceiver, and then Life Cycles was like, eh. And then everything everything from there forward, I was just like, I don't care about this band that much
Man,
anymore.
I've always loved the word alive. I haven't been. I think bands. A great example of a band like that is Avenged Sevenfold, and people
Yeah.
will give a ton of hell to them because they're so different from what Avenged Sevenfold was in like 2001. But you got to remember, these guys, that's all they do. So that they beat these songs to death. They play them 200 days a year, and
Right.
then they move on and they grow up. Bring Me the Horizon's another very drastic example where they even talked about that, where they're like, hey, like, we love what we did back then, but we grew up and that's not who we are anymore. And I think people get this idea in their head of what this band needs to be, and they're not willing to let them stray away from that. And I think especially a band like Wage War, I think they'll come back. I think they'll totally write another album like Blueprints, but they've got to go through their up and down first.
Right. I think the reason we stick, I guess, to our opinions, like they were better back then, it may be just because of our age, right? Because that's what we grew up with when we were 20, 21, 22, when these bands were coming up, or even like Chiodos or Devil's Prada. When I first started listening to that, like, that's what I grew up with. This band is not what I grew up with. I don't appreciate it anymore, but that's just music based over time.
I agree. You correlate that sound and that almost like these records with a time of your life where you felt something or there was something happening in your life. And I think that can either be a positive or negative thing, where you associate music with a horrible thing that happened in your life or an amazing point in your life where you really felt alive.
Right. All right. We almost got to wrap this thing up, so I'm going to give you a few questions here. A few funny questions to brighten up the mood. Now, before the podcast started, I asked you who your favorite band was. Granted, you had a couple answers, but I took a couple of them. You ready? If the Foo Fighters and Motionless in White were in a Hell in the Cell match, who would win?
Probably the Foo Fighters, because Dave Grohl's a pretty burly dude, and I'm pretty sure he's immortal. And in the Pick of Destiny, he was Satan. So.
And he played a show on a broken leg. So.
Exactly.
And Motionless in White, do you think they'd show up with makeup on or no?
I listened to a podcast with Chris Motionless, and he talked about like how they have to do it at this point. Like that's just their brand, and you can't stray away from it.
That'd be like Slipknot just taking off the mask for a whole concert.
It's called Stone Sour, man.
No, that's just Corey Taylor. Or
I was gonna say, sorry, I probably just upset some people.
Punch you through the phone. All right, last question here, and then we'll wrap this thing up. We'll let you plug everything. If you could choose only one genre to listen to for the rest of your life, what genre would it be?
Punk.
Yep. So like your Sum 41s and your Blink-182s, and who else?
Rancid, Anti-Flag, NoFX, Operation Ivy. I can go on for days, man.
How old are you, Jacob?
I told you, dude, I grew up with it. My dad, who was born in the early 70s, so he grew up in Southern California when all these bands were big, so that's what I was exposed to.
Fair enough. Well, Jacob, do this for me. Plug anything you can. So Facebook, Spotify, all that good stuff. Anything we're looking forward to. And don't forget to plug your merch. And go.
Okay. Well, you can find all of my content on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music for From This Day Forward under the name From This Day Forward. That's also what our Facebook is going to be. Our Instagram is From This Day Forward Band. We have a Twitter that's pointless. I'm going to have a YouTube eventually. And we'll talk about that whole thing when that comes.
Perfect. Any ideas on what your YouTube page is going to be?
It'll be covers and collabs. It'll be a lot of collaborations with other artists on covers, just because I want to be able to stay connected with the music scene, with everything that's going on.
Sure. Like right now, it's a pretty good time to do it. So with that being said, that was episode 27 with Jacob Parsons. I appreciate you coming on, and we will talk to you later. Peace.
Later.
Swallow